The sound of metal striking metal echoed across the abandoned fairgrounds. "Hey, stop the excavator!" shouted Mike Daniels, wiping sweat from his brow in the Nebraska summer heat. "I think we hit something." What the construction crew unearthed that July morning wasn't supposed to be there. A bicycle frame, twisted and corroded, buried 6 feet beneath what once was the central pavilion of the Millfield County Fair. The same fairgrounds where, 26 years earlier, 17-year-old Marcus Thompson told his friends, "I'll be right back," before vanishing without a trace. No one connected the buried bicycle to the cold case. Not at first. But Detective Sarah Lawson had never forgotten the Thompson boy's face on the missing posters that had yellowed in the station's evidence room. When the call came in about the construction crew's discovery, something clicked. "Bag everything," she ordered, staring at the rusted handlebars. "And I mean everything." That bicycle, hidden for nearly 3 decades beneath layers of dirt and concrete, would finally answer the question that had haunted Millfield County since September 12, 1998. What happened to Marcus Thompson? The truth would shock a community, devastate a family still clinging to hope, and prove that some secrets refuse to stay buried, no matter how deep you bury them. Before we dive into this heartbreaking cold case, take a second to hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss our investigations into America's most baffling disappearances and the breakthroughs that finally brought answers. Marcus Thompson wasn't just another face in the hallways of Millfield High School. He was the golden boy of a town that lived and breathed Friday night football, standing 6'1" with an easy smile that teachers and classmates alike described as lighting up a room. Marcus had the kind of natural charisma that made him popular without trying. His jersey, number 23, hung in countless bedroom windows across Millfield County, a rural stretch of Nebraska where cornfields outnumbered people, and everyone knew your business before you did. He wasn't just talented, recalls Coach Bill Harmon, now retired but still wearing his Millfield Wolves cap daily. Marcus had this way of making everyone around him better. He'd stay after practice to help the freshmen with their routes. That's rare in a kid with his talent. The Thompson family lived in a modest 2-story home on Maple Street, 3 blocks from the high school. Marcus was the middle child, sandwiched between older sister Kayla and younger brother Jason. His father, Robert Thompson, worked at the grain elevator, while his mother, Diana, taught 2nd grade at Millfield Elementary. "Our dinner table was always full of laughter," Diana Thompson shared in a 2008 interview, her voice breaking. "Marcus was our jokester. He'd imitate his teachers, his coaches. He could even do a spot-on impression of Mayor Wilson." But beneath the athlete's exterior was a thoughtful young man with dreams bigger than Millfield's city limits. His bedroom walls, preserved exactly as he left them, tell the story. Posters of the University of Nebraska Cornhuskers mixed with National Geographic maps. His bookshelf held an unlikely combination of sports biographies and astronomy books. He wanted to study engineering, Robert Thompson explained. Said he'd play college ball to pay for school, but his real passion was building things, always taking apart radios, clocks, anything with wires. Put them back together too, usually working better than before. Marcus's junior year had started with promise. College scouts were already attending games, and his grades, mostly A's with a stubborn B in chemistry, positioned him well for scholarship opportunities. He'd just started dating Emma Lawson, the band director's daughter, and had recently earned enough to buy his prized possession, a red Schwinn mountain bike that gave him freedom to roam beyond Millfield's boundaries. That bike meant everything to him, remembers Jason Thompson, who was only 12 when his brother disappeared. Dad offered to drive him places, but Marcus loved the independence, said he did his best thinking on those long rides. In a town of 8,200 people, the Thompsons were woven into the community fabric. Diana's 2nd graders grew up to become Robert's employees at the grain elevator. The family attended First Lutheran Church every Sunday, where Marcus reluctantly but dutifully sang in the youth choir. Sheriff Dale Cooper, who led the initial investigation, described the Thompsons as the kind of family that makes a small town work. They volunteered, showed up, helped neighbors. When Marcus disappeared, it felt like we all lost someone. The last school photo of Marcus Thompson shows a young man on the cusp of adulthood, confident yet unassuming, with dark hair that perpetually fell across his forehead and a half-smile that suggested he was in on a joke no one else had heard yet. Emma Lawson, now a mother of two living in Omaha, still keeps that photo. "He wasn't perfect," she says quietly. "He could be stubborn, and he hated losing at anything. Board games, card games, didn't matter. But he was kind in ways teenage boys often aren't. The week before he disappeared, he spent an entire Saturday helping my dad build a wheelchair ramp for my grandmother." Marcus's locker became a memorial after his disappearance, first covered with notes begging for his return, later with prayers, and eventually with memories. The school finally removed it during renovations in 2010, but preserved its contents for the Thompson family. "Everyone has that one person who makes them feel like they matter," said Principal Margaret Whitaker at the 20-year remembrance ceremony. For many students at Millfield High, that person was Marcus Thompson. In a cruel twist of fate, the boy who seemed destined to be remembered for touchdowns and trophies would instead become defined by his absence. A cautionary tale parents whispered to children, a case file that refused to close, and a wound that never healed in the heart of Millfield County. September 12, 1998, marked the final Saturday of the Millfield County Fair, an annual tradition dating back to 1923. The weather was unseasonably warm for mid-September in Nebraska, with temperatures hovering around 80 degrees well into the evening. Local meteorologist Tom Benson would later recall it as the kind of perfect fall night that makes you forget winter's coming. The fairgrounds sprawled across 22 acres at the edge of town, transformed for 10 days each year from an empty field into a bustling carnival of lights, sounds, and smells. Ferris wheels and tilt-a-whirls competed with livestock exhibitions and homemade pie contests for attention. The 1998 fair had broken attendance records, partly due to a performance by a rising country music star the night before. For the Thompson family, fair weekend followed a comfortable routine. Robert judged the agricultural machinery exhibition. Diana ran the PTA fundraising booth. Kayla, home from her freshman year at college, helped at the church's funnel cake stand. Jason competed in the junior livestock show with his prize rabbit. And Marcus, fresh off a 3-touchdown game the night before, had the freedom 17-year-olds crave. "He was floating that day," Emma Lawson remembered. "Millfield had beaten our rivals for the first time in 6 years. Everyone wanted to congratulate him." Security camera footage later recovered from the fairground entrance shows Marcus arriving at 5:42 p.m. He wore jeans, his Letterman jacket despite the warmth, and a Nebraska Cornhuskers cap. The red Schwinn mountain bike he pedaled everywhere was clearly visible as he chained it to the bike rack near the main gate. "I teased him about bringing that bike everywhere," said Tyler Wilson, Marcus's best friend since 3rd grade. "He could have gotten a ride with any of us, but he said he liked knowing he could leave whenever he wanted." Between 5:45 p.m. and 8:30 p.m., multiple witnesses reported seeing Marcus throughout the fairgrounds. He played skee-ball at the arcade tent, winning a stuffed penguin he gave to a crying toddler. He ate dinner with teammates at the Knights of Columbus barbecue stand. He visited his mother's booth and left her half a cotton candy, a running joke between them. At approximately 8:35 p.m., Marcus met Emma and their friends near the Ferris wheel. The group of 6 teenagers, Marcus, Emma, Tyler, Heather Jenkins, Brandon Davis, and Melissa Chen, took up an entire car on the ride. "We were all laughing, because Brandon was terrified of heights," Heather Jenkins told investigators. "Marcus kept rocking the car to freak him out." After the Ferris wheel, the group decided to watch the demolition derby at the grandstand. As they walked, Marcus's phone, a recent birthday gift from his parents, buzzed with a text message. "He checked his phone, then got this weird look on his face," Melissa Chen stated in her witness report. "He said he needed to meet someone real quick and would catch up with us." Those words, "I'll be right back," would haunt everyone who heard them. Emma asked if everything was okay. Marcus smiled, gave her a quick kiss on the cheek and said, "Save me a seat. This won't take long." Security footage shows Marcus walking away from his friends at 8:52 p.m. heading toward the carnival section operated by Starlight Amusements, a traveling company that provided the rides and games. That was the last confirmed sighting of Marcus Thompson. When he didn't appear at the grandstand 30 minutes later, his friends weren't immediately concerned. The demolition derby was loud, crowded, and exciting, easy to lose track of time. Emma sent several text messages that showed as delivered but received no response. By 10:15 p.m., as the derby ended and the crowd dispersed, worry began to set in. The group split up to search for Marcus, assuming he'd gotten distracted or lost track of time. At 10:45 p.m., Tyler Wilson found Diana Thompson at the PTA booth, which was closing for the night. "I can still see Tyler's face," Diana later said. "He was trying so hard to look calm, but I knew something was wrong before he opened his mouth." By 11 p.m., Robert Thompson had been alerted, and the family began a systematic search of the fairgrounds. Security staff made announcements over the PA system. Marcus's friends called everyone they knew at the fair. At 11:30 p.m., with the fair closing and still no sign of Marcus, Robert Thompson approached Sheriff Cooper, who was supervising the fair's security detail. Robert wasn't panicking yet, Sheriff Cooper recalled. He kept saying Marcus was responsible, that there must be an explanation. But I saw something in his eyes, a father's instinct that something wasn't right. The initial response followed standard protocol for a missing teenager. Announcements continued. Security checked bathrooms and less traveled areas of the fairgrounds. Most assumed Marcus had met up with other friends or perhaps gone off with a girl. But when midnight came and the fairgrounds emptied with no sign of Marcus, and his bike still chained where he'd left it, the Thompson family's concern deepened into fear. The bike was the red flag, Sheriff Cooper explained years later. Marcus wouldn't leave that bike, and he wouldn't let his family worry. That's when we knew this wasn't a typical teenage misadventure. As the carnival lights powered down and the fairgrounds fell into darkness, a search that would span decades had only just begun. I'm curious. Where are you watching this video from? Drop your location in the comments below. It's amazing how these small-town mysteries resonate with people across the country and around the world. Your perspective might shed new light on this case. By dawn on September 13th, what began as concern had transformed into a full-scale search operation. Sheriff Cooper, operating on minimal sleep, established a command center in the fairgrounds administrative building. The Thompson family had not left the premises all night, holding vigil near Marcus's still-chained bicycle. "We mobilized everything we had," recalled Deputy Maria Vasquez, then a rookie officer. "Every available deputy, volunteer firefighters, even the high school football team showed up without being asked." The search expanded outward from the fairgrounds in concentric circles. Volunteers combed through nearby cornfields in organized lines. The county's 2 K-9 units attempted to track Marcus's scent. But the previous day's heavy foot traffic at the fair created overwhelming scent contamination. By noon, the Nebraska State Patrol had joined the effort, bringing additional resources including a helicopter that circled above Millfield County. Local radio stations interrupted regular programming with descriptions of Marcus and pleas for information. The first 48 hours of any missing person investigation are critical, and law enforcement worked methodically through potential scenarios. Was this a runaway situation? An accident? Foul play? The fact that Marcus left his prized bicycle behind pointed away from him leaving voluntarily. "We pulled the text messages from his phone records," Sheriff Cooper explained in a 2010 interview. The last message he received came from a prepaid phone that was never used again. It read, "Need to talk. Meet me by the ring toss. Important." We never identified who sent it. Investigators interviewed Marcus's friends repeatedly, constructing a minute-by-minute timeline of his last known movements. They questioned every Starlight Amusements employee, over 40 carnival workers who traveled from town to town throughout the Midwest. Carnival workers were always easy suspects, admitted Sheriff Cooper. They're transient by nature, often with spotty backgrounds, but they also have solid alibis because they're working in public view. One carnival employee did catch investigators' attention. 19-year-old Darren Miller, who operated the ring toss booth mentioned in the mysterious text. Miller claimed he never saw Marcus that night and was busy with customers during the time in question. Several witnesses confirmed seeing Miller working his booth, and without evidence to hold him, he left town with the carnival 2 days later. As the search continued, the Thompson family appeared on local news, then regional broadcasts. Diana Thompson, clutching her son's football jersey, made a tearful plea. "Marcus, if you can hear this, please come home. If someone has taken him—" Her voice broke. "Please, he's just a boy. He has his whole life ahead of him." The community rallied around the family. Millfield High School postponed its homecoming game. Local businesses donated food to search volunteers and printed thousands of missing person flyers. A reward fund, started by Coach Harmon with $500 from his personal savings, quickly grew to $25,000 through community donations. "I've never seen a town come together like that," said Mayor Wilson. "Everyone felt it could have been their child. Marcus wasn't just the Thompsons' son. He belonged to all of us." As days stretched into a week with no significant leads, the investigation faced mounting challenges. The fairgrounds had been dismantled, taking with it potential evidence. The carnival had moved on to 3 different towns since leaving Millfield. Media attention began to wane as other stories took precedence. For the Thompson family, the nightmare only intensified. Robert took leave from his job to coordinate volunteer searches. Diana continued showing up at the command center daily, bringing home-cooked meals for officers and updating a growing wall of maps marking searched areas. Kayla dropped out of college that semester to help at home. Young Jason, confused and frightened, began sleeping in his missing brother's room. The hardest part wasn't the searching, Robert Thompson confessed years later. It was going home each night having found nothing, seeing his empty chair at dinner, wondering if he was cold, hungry, afraid, or worse. By the 1-month mark, the active search had been scaled back. The command center relocated to the sheriff's office. The case remained active, but the urgent energy of those first days had given way to the methodical pace of a long-term investigation. Sheriff Cooper assigned Deputy Vasquez to maintain the case file full-time, an unusual move for a department their size. "I saw something in her," he explained. "A refusal to let this go. I knew she'd keep pushing when others might move on." As fall turned to winter, Marcus Thompson's disappearance settled into Millfield County like a heavy fog, always present, affecting everything, impossible to see through. His senior portrait hung in the yearbook that spring under the caption "Missing Not Forgotten." His graduation gown was displayed on an empty chair during the ceremony. For investigators, the case was becoming what they feared most: cold. If you're finding this case as compelling and heartbreaking as I do, please hit that like button and leave a comment below. Your engagement helps this channel reach more people who might have information about similar cold cases. Plus, I'd love to hear your theories about what happened to Marcus that night at the fair. Darren Miller didn't stand out among the Starlight Amusements crew. At 19, he was neither the youngest nor the oldest of the carnival workers who traveled the Midwest circuit from April through October each year. Standing 5'10", with sandy brown hair typically hidden under a company baseball cap, he blended into the background of the fairground landscape. He was quiet, did his job, no complaints, recalled Vernon Starks, the operations manager for Starlight Amusements in 1998. Showed up on time, handled cash accurately, didn't cause problems. That's all you really ask for in this business. Miller had joined the carnival circuit in early April that year, hired at a job fair in Oklahoma City. His application listed previous experience working at a movie theater and a fast food restaurant. He provided an Oklahoma driver's license and social security number, both of which checked out when Starlight ran their standard background check, which revealed nothing more concerning than a speeding ticket. What the background check didn't show was that Darren Miller was a young man adrift. Raised in a succession of foster homes across Oklahoma and Kansas, he had aged out of the system just months before joining Starlight. With no family connections and minimal education, he dropped out after his sophomore year of high school. The carnival offered something appealing: movement, anonymity, and cash in hand. These traveling shows were different back then, explained Dr. Eleanor Winters, a criminologist who later studied the case. Pre-internet, pre-social media, minimal background checks. Perfect environments for people looking to reinvent themselves or disappear into the workforce. At the Millfield County Fair, Miller operated the ring toss booth, a simple game where players attempted to land plastic rings around the necks of bottles. The booth was positioned in the central midway, approximately 200 yards from the Ferris wheel where Marcus was last seen with his friends. When investigators first questioned Miller on September 13th, he appeared cooperative but nervous, a demeanor that Deputy Vasquez noted but didn't find unusual. "Everyone gets nervous talking to police," she explained, "especially young people, especially when someone's missing." His reaction didn't stand out compared to the other carnival employees. Miller's statement was straightforward. He worked his booth from 4 p.m. until closing at 11 p.m., with two 15-minute breaks at 6:30 p.m. and 9:15 p.m. During breaks, another employee, Tammy Winters, 22, covered his station. He claimed he spent his breaks using the portable toilets and smoking cigarettes behind the game booths. He denied sending any text messages to Marcus Thompson and stated he didn't recognize Marcus from the photograph investigators showed him. "I see hundreds of faces every day," he told deputies. "They all blur together after a while." His alibi appeared solid. 3 separate witnesses confirmed seeing Miller working the ring toss during the critical time frame when Marcus disappeared. Tammy Winters verified covering his breaks at the times he specified. The booth's cash receipts aligned with continuous operation throughout the evening. "On paper, everything checked out," Sheriff Cooper admitted. "We had a missing teenager and 40-plus carnival workers to interview, all preparing to leave town. Without specific evidence pointing to Miller, we couldn't justify holding him." When Starlight Amusements packed up and left Millfield on September 14th, Miller went with them. The carnival's next stops included county fairs in Missouri, Arkansas, and finally Oklahoma, where the season would end in late October. What investigators didn't know then, couldn't have known, was that Darren Miller would vanish almost as completely as Marcus Thompson after the carnival season ended. When Deputy Vasquez attempted to re-interview Starlight employees 2 months later, she discovered Miller had collected his final paycheck in Oklahoma City and provided no forwarding address. That raised flags, but it wasn't unprecedented, Vasquez explained. Seasonal workers often drift. Some return the next season, some don't. Without evidence connecting him to Marcus, we couldn't justify the resources for a multi-state search for a former carnival worker who might have simply moved on with his life. Several factors contributed to Miller not becoming a primary suspect in the initial investigation. First, the text message that lured Marcus to the carnival area came from a prepaid phone that was never activated again, a dead end for 1998 technology. Second, no witnesses reported seeing Marcus and Miller together. Third, Miller's documented presence at his booth created an apparent alibi. Perhaps most significantly, investigators were working with a different profile in mind. "We were looking for someone with a history of violence or sexual offenses," Sheriff Cooper explained. "Someone who might target a teenage boy. Miller had no criminal history whatsoever. He didn't fit the profile our FBI consultants helped develop." The investigation continued to pursue other leads. A registered sex offender who lived near the fairgrounds but had a verified alibi. A rival football player who had threatened Marcus after the previous night's game. Even a college scout who had arranged to meet Marcus but claimed the meeting never occurred. Meanwhile, the carnival continued its route through the heartland, and Darren Miller continued operating his ring toss booth, collecting stuffed animals from a storage bin and handing them to winners with a practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. What no one knew was that beneath Miller's unremarkable exterior lay a troubled history that hadn't appeared in any background check. Sealed juvenile records in Kansas would have revealed multiple incidents of animal cruelty and fire setting, 2 components of what psychologists call the homicidal triad. A psychiatric evaluation at age 15 had noted concerning detachment and lack of empathy, along with possible dissociative episodes under stress. The system failed twice, Dr. Winters would later write in her analysis of the case. First, in providing adequate intervention during Miller's formative years, and second in making his history accessible to those who needed to evaluate the risk he posed. As winter settled over Nebraska, the Thompson family marked their first Christmas with an empty chair at the table. Investigators followed diminishing leads. And somewhere, records would later suggest Arkansas or eastern Oklahoma, Darren Miller began a new life under a different name, carrying with him a secret that would remain buried as deeply as the evidence of his crime. The carnival worker who didn't stand out would eventually become the center of Nebraska's most notorious cold case. But that revelation remained decades in the future, hidden like the rusted bicycle that would eventually bring truth to light. As 1998 gave way to 1999, the active investigation into Marcus Thompson's disappearance gradually transitioned into what law enforcement officers dread most: a cold case. The command center at the sheriff's office was dismantled. The volunteer search teams disbanded. The missing posters that had plastered Millfield County began to weather and fade, though Diana Thompson religiously replaced the one in their front window every month. "The first year is a special kind of hell," Robert Thompson told the Millfield Gazette on the one-year anniversary. "You live suspended between hope and grief, unable to move forward, unable to go back." By the end of 1999, the case file had grown to 11 boxes of witness statements, search reports, and dead-end leads. Deputy Maria Vasquez, who had been promoted to detective largely due to her work on the case, maintained a meticulous organization system and reviewed the file weekly, looking for connections others might have missed. "I made a promise to Diana Thompson," Vasquez recalled. "I told her I wouldn't stop until we had answers. Some days, that promise was the only thing keeping the investigation alive." The millennium turned. The world worried about Y2K. Millfield High School retired Marcus's football jersey number in a somber ceremony. The Thompson family established a scholarship in Marcus's name for a senior who exemplified his character and determination. In 2001, the case received a brief resurgence of attention when a true crime television show featured Marcus's disappearance. The episode generated over 50 tips from across the country, each one methodically investigated and ultimately eliminated. "That's the cruelty of these cases," Sheriff Cooper explained. "Each new lead raises the family's hopes. Each dead end crushes them all over again." One tip came from a truck driver who claimed to have given a ride to a young man matching Marcus's description near Kansas City in early 2000. The young man allegedly mentioned running away from a small town in Nebraska. Detective Vasquez drove 7 hours to interview the truck driver, only to discover his timeline was off by nearly 2 years. Another promising lead emerged in 2003 when a former Starlight Amusements employee contacted authorities claiming to have overheard an incriminating conversation between carnival workers regarding a problem that had been taken care of in Nebraska. The informant, however, was in prison on fraud charges and seeking consideration for his sentence. When pressed for details, his story fell apart. The Thompson family weathered these disappointments while struggling to maintain some semblance of normal life. Robert continued working at the grain elevator, though colleagues noted he became more withdrawn, his hair prematurely graying. Diana took a leave of absence from teaching that stretched into resignation. She instead channeled her energy into advocacy for missing children, establishing a regional support network for families facing similar nightmares. Kayla eventually returned to college, graduating with a degree in criminal justice, a career path directly inspired by her brother's case. Jason, the youngest Thompson, grew up in the shadow of absence, coming of age in a household defined by loss. "People expect you to get over it eventually," Diana Thompson said during a 2005 interview. "They stop asking. They stop mentioning his name. But for us, Marcus isn't in the past. He's with us every day in every empty chair, every holiday, every milestone he's missing." The family never moved from their house on Maple Street, leaving Marcus's bedroom untouched, a time capsule of teenage life, frozen in September 1998. His football trophies gathered dust on shelves. College brochures still lay open on his desk. The calendar on his wall remained turned to September, the 12th circled in red ink with the notation, County Fair. Each year on the anniversary of his disappearance, the Thompson family held a candlelight vigil at the fairgrounds. What began as a community-wide event with hundreds of attendees gradually dwindled to dozens, then to a small circle of family, close friends, and a few dedicated officers. "It's not that people stopped caring," explained Pastor Michael Reynolds of First Lutheran Church. "It's that life forces people to move forward." But the Thompsons existed in a state of suspended animation, unable to grieve properly without answers, unable to heal without closure. The investigation faced practical challenges as years passed. In 2007, Sheriff Cooper retired, replaced by a younger sheriff with different priorities and a budget increasingly stretched thin. The following year, Detective Vasquez was promoted to lieutenant, reducing her direct involvement with cold cases. Physical evidence, stored in the county's modest evidence room, required repackaging as containers deteriorated. Technology offered new hope. In 2010, the Nebraska State Patrol's newly formed cold case unit selected Marcus's disappearance as one of 5 priority cases for review. They digitized the entire case file, re-interviewed key witnesses using cognitive interview techniques unavailable in 1998, and ran DNA samples through expanded databases. These efforts yielded a tantalizing but ultimately frustrating development. An unidentified male DNA profile recovered from the interior pocket of Marcus's Letterman jacket, which had been hanging in his bedroom when he disappeared. The profile didn't match any family members or known associates, but it also didn't match anyone in the criminal DNA databases. "It was something, but not enough," Lieutenant Vasquez explained. "We had a DNA profile with no name to attach to it." By the 15th anniversary in 2013, the case had been featured in 3 books about unsolved Midwestern mysteries. A popular true crime podcast dedicated 2 episodes to Marcus's disappearance, introducing the case to a new generation. Online forums debated theories ranging from the plausible to the absurd. The Thompson family weathered these waves of attention with dignified resilience. They never sought the spotlight but understood that media coverage kept Marcus's case alive in public consciousness. Diana maintained a website with Marcus's information, updating it with age progression photos created by forensic artists every few years. "I don't recognize the young man in those images," she confessed during a 2018 interview. "In my heart, he's forever 17, but someone might recognize the man he would have become." 20 years after the disappearance, Millfield County held a memorial service that struck a difficult balance, honoring Marcus's memory while acknowledging the diminishing likelihood of his return. The high school dedicated a bench near the football field, with a bronze plaque bearing his name and jersey number. Robert Thompson, his voice steady, but his hands trembling, thanked the community for remembering our boy when the rest of the world has moved on. Behind the scenes, the case file continued to gather dust. Budget cuts reduced cold case reviews to once every 5 years. Detective Vasquez, now Captain Vasquez, approached retirement age herself. The Starlight Amusements Company had been sold twice, its records from 1998 lost in transitions. Witnesses moved away, memories faded, and the trail grew colder. By 2023, the 25th anniversary passed with a smaller vigil than ever before. The Thompson family, now including Kayla's teenage children, who never knew their uncle, stood in a tight circle at the fairgrounds. Jason, now older than Marcus had lived to be, placed a football at the base of a memorial stone. No one present could have imagined that construction equipment would soon break ground on that very spot, unearthing the first tangible clue in a case that had haunted Nebraska for a generation. I'm curious, what time is it where you're watching this video? Drop it in the comments below. It's fascinating to think about how this story from small-town Nebraska is reaching people across different time zones, perhaps even as you're having your morning coffee or winding down for the night. In early 2024, the Millfield County Board of Supervisors approved a long-delayed renovation of the fairgrounds. The $4.2 million project aimed to modernize the aging facilities, replacing the central pavilion with a climate-controlled event center that could generate revenue year-round. After decades of postponements due to budget constraints, the project finally moved forward, thanks to a combination of federal infrastructure grants and a community fundraising campaign. Groundbreaking occurred on July 8, 2024, a sweltering Monday when temperatures reached 95 degrees by noon. Midwest Construction, a company based in Lincoln, brought in heavy equipment to begin excavation for the new building's foundation. The site plan called for digging 6 feet below the former pavilion to accommodate modern utilities and a concrete foundation. Mike Daniels, a 42-year-old excavator operator with 15 years of experience, had no personal connection to the Thompson case. Having grown up in Omaha, he'd moved to the area just 5 years earlier and knew the story only vaguely as local lore. It was just another job site until it wasn't, Daniels later told reporters. I was making my third pass with the excavator when I felt something solid that didn't feel like a rock or pipe. The sound was different. Metal on metal. At approximately 10:17 a.m., Daniels halted the excavator and called over site supervisor Elaine Winters. Together they carefully cleared away soil from what appeared to be a rusted metal object. As more dirt was removed by hand, the distinctive shape of a bicycle frame emerged from the earth. I knew immediately this wasn't construction debris, Winters recalled. This was deliberately buried, and given where we were digging, my mind went straight to that missing boy from years back. Winters made the decision to stop all construction activity and contact authorities. Her call reached the sheriff's office at 10:32 a.m., where dispatcher Kevin Reeves recognized the potential significance immediately. Within minutes, Sheriff Thomas Grayson was en route to the scene, and Captain Maria Vasquez, just 3 months from retirement, was called in from a day off. I'd imagined this moment for 26 years, Vasquez would later say, finding something, anything that would break the case open. When the call came, I knew before they even said it. Sometimes you just feel when a case is about to move. By 11 a.m., the construction site had been transformed into a crime scene. Yellow tape cordoned off a 50-yard perimeter. The partially excavated bicycle remained in situ as forensic photographers documented its position from multiple angles. Sheriff Grayson contacted the Nebraska State Patrol's Criminal Investigation Division, requesting assistance from their specialized evidence recovery team. Word spread through Millfield with the efficiency that only small towns possess. By noon, local news vans had arrived. By 12:30, Robert Thompson stood at the perimeter tape, his face a mask of emotions too complex to name. Captain Vasquez, breaking protocol, crossed the line to speak with him privately. I didn't tell him it was Marcus's bike, she explained later. We hadn't confirmed that yet, but I told him we'd found something significant, and I promised him what I'd promised 26 years earlier, that we wouldn't stop until we had answers. The bicycle was carefully excavated over the next 4 hours, with soil samples taken at regular intervals around it. When finally removed from the ground, the condition told its own story. The frame was bent at an unnatural angle, consistent with significant impact. The handlebars were twisted. Most of the red paint had corroded away, but patches remained visible under the rust. Even in that condition, Robert Thompson identified it immediately, Sheriff Grayson said. He pointed to a small dent in the crossbar and said Marcus had gotten that the week he bought it, bumping against a fire hydrant. That dent was still visible despite the corrosion. The bicycle was transported to the Nebraska State Patrol's forensic laboratory in Lincoln, where a team of specialists began the painstaking process of evidence recovery. Modern techniques unavailable in 1998 offered new possibilities for solving the decades-old mystery. Soil and rust actually preserve certain types of evidence, explained Dr. Amelia Richardson, the forensic anthropologist who led the examination. Biological material can survive in these conditions, protected from elements that might otherwise degrade it. The analysis revealed multiple significant findings. First, soil compression patterns indicated the bicycle had been buried shortly after Marcus's disappearance, not years later. Second, despite extensive corrosion, blood evidence was recovered from the twisted handlebars, blood that DNA analysis would later confirm belonged to Marcus Thompson. Most crucially, the forensic team discovered something lodged in the bicycle's chain mechanism, a partial fingerprint preserved in rust. Using advanced imaging technology and enhancement techniques, technicians were able to recover enough ridge detail for comparison. Fingerprints don't change over time, noted FBI fingerprint analyst Samuel Washington, who consulted on the case. If that print was in the database, we'd find a match regardless of how many years had passed. The partial print was run through AFIS, the automated fingerprint identification system, which had expanded exponentially since 1998. The database now included not just criminal prints, but also those collected from military service, government employment, and certain professional licenses. On July 15, 2024, exactly 1 week after the bicycle's discovery, the system returned a match. The fingerprint belonged to David Allen Reynolds, formerly known as Darren Miller, now a 45-year-old maintenance supervisor at an apartment complex in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Further database searches revealed Reynolds had been fingerprinted in 2012 when applying for a position that required a background check for work in residential buildings. The system worked exactly as designed, Washington explained. It just took 26 years for the evidence to enter the system. Captain Vasquez, who had postponed her retirement upon the bicycle's discovery, received the fingerprint match report at 3:42 p.m. Within the hour, she was in Sheriff Grayson's office planning an interstate operation in coordination with Oklahoma authorities. The bicycle that Marcus Thompson had cherished, that had given him independence and joy, had finally spoken from its earthen grave, setting in motion the final chapter of a mystery that had defined a generation in Millfield County. Before we continue with what happened next in this extraordinary case, take a moment to join our community of true crime followers. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss the moment when justice finally catches up to those who think they've gotten away with their crimes. These cold cases remind us that the truth has infinite patience, and so do the dedicated investigators who never stop searching for answers. With the fingerprint match providing a crucial breakthrough, investigators face the challenge of building a case strong enough for prosecution after 26 years. The bicycle and its location offered compelling physical evidence, but prosecutors would need more to convince a jury beyond reasonable doubt. Captain Vasquez and Sheriff Grayson assembled a task force that included Nebraska State Patrol investigators, an FBI cold case specialist, and the county prosecutor. Their first step was establishing that David Allen Reynolds and Darren Miller were indeed the same person. People change names for many legitimate reasons, explained District Attorney Eleanor Simmons. We needed ironclad proof of identity before proceeding further. Records revealed that Darren Miller had effectively ceased to exist after October 1998. The Social Security number on his Starlight Amusements employment application went dormant. Then, in early 1999, David Allen Reynolds appeared in eastern Oklahoma, using a different Social Security number obtained with a counterfeit birth certificate, a crime that was much easier to commit in the pre-digital era. Investigators obtained Reynolds' current driver's license photo and compared it with the grainy staff photograph from Starlight Amusements' 1998 employee records. Facial recognition software confirmed what human eyes suggested. Despite the passage of time, they were the same person. With identity established, the task force turned to the evidence itself. The bicycle's burial location proved critically important. It had been found beneath what was the central pavilion in 1998, an area that would have been accessible to carnival workers during setup and teardown, but not during fair operations when the space was filled with vendor booths and visitors. The timeline suddenly made sense, Captain Vasquez noted. The carnival began dismantling their equipment the morning after Marcus disappeared. The pavilion area would have been one of the first sections cleared, creating an opportunity to dig without being observed. Modern forensic techniques allowed investigators to extract evidence that would have been impossible to detect in 1998. Soil analysis from around the bicycle revealed traces of cleaning chemicals consistent with industrial-grade products used by carnival operations to maintain equipment. More significantly, advanced DNA recovery methods identified genetic material on the bicycle's bent frame that didn't belong to Marcus. We used a technique called massively parallel sequencing, explained Dr. Richardson. It allows us to separate and identify DNA mixtures that older methods couldn't distinguish. We found a secondary DNA profile that was severely degraded, but still yielded enough markers for comparison. While investigators worked to build their case scientifically, they also revisited witness statements from 1998 with fresh perspective. Statements that seemed insignificant at the time now took on new meaning. A food vendor had reported seeing a carnival worker carrying what looked like a tarp-wrapped bundle toward the pavilion area around 5:30 a.m. on September 13th, hours before the official teardown began. The vendor hadn't thought much of it, assuming it was routine carnival business. When shown a photo lineup that included Reynolds's 1998 staff photo, the vendor identified him with moderate confidence despite the years that had passed. Another crucial piece fell into place when investigators re-interviewed Tammy Winters, who had covered Miller's ring toss booth during his breaks. In her original statement, she mentioned that Miller took an unusually long break around 9:15 p.m., returning nearly 30 minutes later rather than the scheduled 15 minutes. When asked why she hadn't reported this discrepancy in 1998, she explained that Miller had asked her to cover for him, claiming he wasn't feeling well. "I didn't think it mattered," Winters told investigators in 2024. "Everyone stretched their breaks when they could. But he was different when he came back, sweating despite the cooler evening air, jumpy. I remember he changed his shirt too, said he'd spilled something on it." The mysterious text message that had lured Marcus to the carnival area remained unresolved until digital forensics experts applied new techniques to the original phone records. While the prepaid phone was never recovered, enhanced analysis of cell tower data narrowed its activation location to within 100 yards of the carnival workers' temporary housing area, trailers set up behind the fairgrounds for the duration of the event. In 1998, cell location data was rudimentary at best, explained FBI digital forensics specialist Aaron Chen. Today, we can retroactively apply more precise analysis to the original data points, creating a much clearer picture of where that phone was when it sent the message. The most damning evidence came from the bicycle itself. Metallurgists determined that the frame damage wasn't consistent with being struck by a vehicle, as some had theorized, but rather with significant blunt force trauma, as if the bicycle had been used as a weapon or had been violently struck with a heavy object. "The damage pattern tells a story," said forensic metallurgist Dr. Sophia Patel. "This wasn't from a fall or accident. The frame was bent from a deliberate application of force, consistent with someone swinging it against something, or someone. Blood evidence recovered from the handlebars, and frame belonged primarily to Marcus, but trace amounts of blood from another individual were also identified, blood that created a partial DNA profile consistent with samples later obtained from David Allen Reynolds through a search warrant. As the evidence mounted, investigators constructed a theory of what happened that September night in 1998. Miller had somehow lured Marcus to a secluded area using the prepaid phone, likely attacked him with or using the bicycle, and then concealed evidence by burying the bicycle during the carnival teardown when digging wouldn't attract attention. The hardest question remained unanswered, Sheriff Grayson acknowledged. Where was Marcus's body? Without those answers, we knew the case would be challenging to prosecute. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. When investigators began surveilling Reynolds in Oklahoma, they observed him making weekly visits to a storage facility on the outskirts of Tulsa. A judge granted a search warrant based on the mounting evidence, and on August 3, 2024, authorities opened Unit No. 7 at Secure Store Self-Storage. Inside, they found dozens of journals, handwritten accounts spanning decades. Reynolds had documented his thoughts, fears, and memories in meticulous detail. Several entries from September 1998 had been torn out, but modern forensic techniques revealed impressions on adjacent pages. Forensic document examiners were able to recover portions of the missing content, including a hand-drawn map. The map led investigators to a location 3 miles from the Millfield County Fairgrounds, an abandoned well on property that had been vacant since the 1980s. Ground-penetrating radar confirmed an anomaly at the depth indicated in Reynolds's journal. After 26 years of silence, the final pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. The case against David Allen Reynolds was nearly ready for prosecution. What's the weather like where you're watching from today? Drop a comment below. It's fascinating to think that while we're exploring this cold case from Nebraska, You might be experiencing anything from desert heat to mountain snow to tropical storms. Our weather shapes our days, just as these unsolved mysteries shape communities for decades. The operation to apprehend David Allen Reynolds began at dawn on July 17, 2024. A joint task force comprising Nebraska State Patrol investigators, FBI agents, and Tulsa Police Department officers assembled at 5 a.m. in a hotel conference room 3 miles from the Pine Ridge apartment complex where Reynolds had worked for the past 7 years. Captain Maria Vasquez and Sheriff Thomas Grayson had flown to Tulsa the previous evening, bringing with them the case file that had followed Vasquez throughout her career. As the most knowledgeable person on the Thompson case, Vasquez would be present for the arrest and subsequent interrogation, though jurisdiction required Oklahoma officers to take the lead. "We had one shot at this," Sheriff Grayson explained. "The element of surprise was critical. If Reynolds got wind of the investigation, we risked losing him again." Surveillance established that Reynolds typically arrived at the maintenance shop by 6:30 a.m. to collect work orders before other employees arrived. The task force planned to intercept him in the parking lot, a location that minimized risk to the public while providing tactical advantages for law enforcement. At 6:22 a.m., Reynolds pulled into the apartment complex driving a blue Ford F-150 pickup. As he stepped out of his vehicle, 4 unmarked police cars smoothly blocked potential escape routes. 8 officers approached with weapons drawn but not aimed, identifying themselves as law enforcement. "He froze completely," recalled Tulsa Police Sergeant James Wilson. "No attempt to run or resist. His face just went blank, like he'd been expecting this moment for 26 years and it had finally arrived." Reynolds was taken into custody without incident. A search of his vehicle revealed nothing of evidentiary value, though his apartment would later yield more significant findings. He was transported to Tulsa Police Headquarters, where an interrogation room had been prepared with recording equipment and a case timeline hidden from view. Captain Vasquez observed through one-way glass as Tulsa detectives began the interview. Reynolds waived his right to an attorney, a decision that surprised investigators but suggested a man perhaps ready to unburden himself after decades of carrying a secret. The interrogation strategy was carefully planned. Start with his current life, gradually work backward through his history, and only then introduce the evidence connecting him to Marcus Thompson. For the first hour, Reynolds spoke calmly about his life in Tulsa, his job, his apartment, his solitary hobbies of fishing and woodworking. When questioned about his previous identities, Reynolds admitted to changing his name in 2003 but claimed it was to make a fresh start after a difficult youth. He acknowledged working for Starlight Amusements in the late 1990s, but initially denied any memory of the Millfield County Fair specifically. "I worked dozens of fairs every season," he stated flatly. "They all blur together after a while." The turning point came 3 hours into the interrogation, when detectives placed a photograph of the recovered bicycle on the table. Reynolds stared at it silently for 27 seconds, a pause so pronounced that the interview transcript notes it specifically. "Where did you find that?" he finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "You know exactly where it was found," responded Detective Sarah Martinez. "The question is, why was it there?" Reynolds closed his eyes and exhaled slowly. When he opened them again, Captain Vasquez, watching from behind the glass, would later describe seeing the mask fall away, revealing the 19-year-old carnival worker, who had carried this burden since 1998. What followed was a 4-hour confession, documented on video, and later transcribed into a 42-page statement that would finally answer the questions that had haunted the Thompson family in Millfield County for more than 2 decades. According to Reynolds, the encounter with Marcus Thompson began with a chance interaction earlier on the day of the disappearance. Marcus had played the ring toss game several times that afternoon, winning a small prize that he gave to a younger child. Reynolds had noticed the teenager's generosity and striking good looks. "I couldn't stop thinking about him," Reynolds confessed. "I kept watching for him throughout the day." Reynolds admitted to purchasing a prepaid phone specifically to text Marcus, claiming he had information about college scouts who were looking for him, knowledge gleaned from overhearing Marcus's conversations with friends at the booth. When Marcus arrived at the meeting point near the ring toss, Reynolds told him the scouts wanted to meet behind the maintenance area where it was quieter. He trusted me, Reynolds said, his voice hollow. He had no reason not to. In the secluded area behind the carnival storage trailers, Reynolds attempted to make a sexual advance. When Marcus rejected him and threatened to report the incident, Reynolds panicked. "I just wanted him to be quiet," he stated. "I grabbed the bike he was still holding and swung it at him. I didn't mean to hit him so hard." The blow struck Marcus in the head, causing him to fall and hit his head again on the corner of a concrete pad used for generator placement. Reynolds described watching in horror as Marcus lay motionless, blood pooling beneath his head. "I knew he was dead," Reynolds said. "I checked for a pulse like they show on TV. There was nothing." In a state of panic, Reynolds explained how he dragged Marcus's body into a storage trailer, concealing it beneath canvas tarps used for the carnival tents. After his shift ended at 11 p.m., he returned with a shovel from the maintenance supplies and dug a grave in the soft ground beneath the central pavilion, an area he knew would be dismantled the following day as the carnival moved on. "The ground was soft from rain earlier that week," he explained. "I buried him with the bike because I didn't know what else to do with it. I knew his fingerprints were on it." Reynolds buried both the body and the bicycle, then spread sawdust from the livestock barns over the disturbed earth. By morning, carnival workers were already dismantling the surrounding booths, and no one noticed the freshly turned soil that would soon be covered by temporary flooring. "I convinced myself no one would ever find him," Reynolds concluded. "The carnival left town. I left that life behind eventually. I thought it was over." News of the confession reached Millfield within hours. Diana Thompson, now 72, received the call from Captain Vasquez personally. After 26 years of uncertainty, the Thompson family finally had answers, though the truth brought its own form of devastation. A spontaneous gathering formed at the fairgrounds that evening. Hundreds of community members, many too young to remember Marcus directly, brought candles forming a circle of light around the excavation site where his bicycle had been found and where, investigators now knew, his remains still lay buried. On July 23, 2024, forensic archaeologists completed the careful excavation beneath the former pavilion at the Millfield County Fairgrounds. Their work confirmed the final piece of David Allen Reynolds' confession. Marcus Thompson's remains were recovered from the exact location Reynolds had described, buried 6 feet beneath where generations of fairgoers had walked, never knowing what lay below. For the Thompson family, the discovery brought the painful gift of certainty. After 26 years of wondering, of imagining countless scenarios both hopeful and horrific, they finally knew the truth. "There's no such thing as closure, not really," Diana Thompson told reporters, her voice steady despite her tears. "But there is an end to wondering. There is an answer to the question that has defined our lives for nearly 3 decades. Marcus was finally laid to rest on August 5, 2024, in a ceremony that drew over 2,000 attendees. The funeral procession stretched for miles, led by the Millfield High School football team in their jerseys, each player carrying a white rose. Former teammates, now middle-aged men with families of their own, served as pallbearers. Coach Harmon, now 83, stood supported by former players as the casket passed. "Today, we bring our boy home," Robert Thompson said in his eulogy, his voice breaking only once. "Not the way we prayed for all these years, but home nonetheless." The legal proceedings moved forward with unexpected swiftness. Reynolds waived extradition to Nebraska and pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, sparing the Thompson family the trauma of a trial. On November 12, 2024, he was sentenced to 60 years in the Nebraska State Penitentiary, effectively a life sentence for the now 45-year-old man. In his statement to the court, Reynolds offered no excuses, only an acknowledgement of the devastation he had caused. "I've lived 26 years knowing what I took from this family, from this community. I don't ask for forgiveness. I only hope that knowing the truth brings some measure of peace to those I've hurt." For Captain Maria Vasquez, the resolution of the case provided a fitting capstone to her distinguished career. At her retirement ceremony in December 2024, She reflected on the investigation that had spanned her entire time in law enforcement. Cold cases are never truly cold to the families who live with unanswered questions, she said, and they're never cold to the investigators who carry them home each night. This case reminds us that persistence matters, that truth has patience, and that justice, while sometimes delayed, can still be served. The Thompson family established the Marcus Thompson Foundation, dedicated to supporting cold case investigations across the Midwest and providing resources for families of missing persons. The foundation's first initiative funded advanced forensic training for rural law enforcement agencies that often lack resources for solving complex cases. In Millfield, the county fair continues, though now with a permanent memorial garden where the central pavilion once stood. A bronze statue depicts a young man with a football under one arm and a bicycle beside him, his gaze fixed on a horizon he never reached. The inscription reads simply, Marcus Thompson, 1981-1998, remembered always. For the community that searched for him, the family that never stopped waiting, and the investigators who never abandoned the case, the discovery beneath the fairgrounds provided an ending to a story that had remained unfinished for too long. Not a happy ending. That possibility vanished on a September night in 1998. But an ending that finally allowed a community to move from mystery to memory, from question to answer, from searching to remembering. If this story moved you as much as it has moved our team, please consider sharing this video with others who appreciate the importance of never giving up on finding the truth. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications to join us for more in-depth investigations into cases that remind us that, no matter how much time passes, justice and truth remain possible. What cold case would you like us to cover next? Let us know in the comments below.